Hello and welcome to your very last notes on memory part 6. In this part, we're going to be talking about some interesting things that we've kind of mentioned already before, but how we create false memories, how we actually construct memories, and some things that can go wrong while we're constructing memories. So first I want to show you your objectives for this chapter. You may have already written these down when you skimmed it last week, but your objectives, no, I'm sorry, not for this chapter, just for this section. So at the end of the note, you should be able to tell me how do misinformation, imagination, and source amnesia, so those three things, misinformation, imagination, and source amnesia, influence memory construction. And then the last one, how real seeming are false memories. So we're going to talk about false memories and why people tend to view them or feel them as real. Okay, so the first thing we're going to look at, we're going to talk about some interesting studies done and some people, so psychologists that led these studies. So it might be a good idea to jot down their names as well as what their study showed or why it was important. So the first thing we're going to look at is Loftus and his memory studies. So I think it's an interesting type of, I took this quote from your book. So when it was talking about misinformation and imagination effects, it basically was saying that information acquired after an event can alter the memory of the event. So you get some interference, right? Your brain's still trying to like construct this memory, and it has just as much of effect pulling it out as it does putting it in sometimes. So sometimes information that you acquire after an event can alter the memory of the actual event. So Loftus did a bunch of studies with car crashes and eyewitness accounts of a car crash. So what happened is they had all these participants and they were shown a car crash or shown a picture of a car crash and a car scene. And then a week later, they were asked questions about what they saw. So imagine that you witnessed a car crash and someone took down your number, right, because you saw it, and then they're going to call you back a week later, or a policeman might come and interview you about the accident. Okay, so here was the actual depiction of the accident. But what Loftus found is that how you framed the question could alter the way the person answered it, right? So think about like a defense attorney trying to mislead or to kind of get answers out that might not have actually happened. So the leading question here was about how fast were the cars going when they smashed into each other. So just the addition of this word smashed made people remember a whole lot of things that they did not actually see. So here's something what they would be seeing. So how fast were the cars going when they smashed into each other? And the people might answer 40 miles an hour. But then the next question would be, was there any broken glass? And if the people heard the word smashed, they were way more likely to say that they saw broken glass, that they saw more damage. And so there's this leading word, how they framed the question, made them actually see that happen. And then when asked even later in the study what they saw, they would actually re-describe the entire crash by having this type of depiction, when in reality the first thing they saw was something like this. People imagined yield signs instead of stop signs, different colors, like all depending on how they was first framed. So you can think about what implications this might have when you are interviewing witnesses about crimes that they saw, or how reliant those eyewitness accounts may be. Okay, so information that you got after the event can alter the actually memory of it, and we'll talk about why in just a second. So some imagining effects, I what's it called? I italicize this word because it's not a vocab word, but it's in my AP book that you don't have, and I thought it'd be a good idea for you to have it. So why does imagination have such an effect on changing memories? And what we have found is that when you repeatedly imagine something that didn't happen, you can actually create false memories. So there's another study that was done with memory where they just had people come into the lab and imagine just very normal things, like that you broke a stapler, that you broke a toothpick, and so they actually had them imagining those things. So close your eyes and visualizing that happening actually created memories that were false. So they actually remembered a year later, oh yeah, I remember that study, I broke a stapler. or I broke a toothpick. They remember those things. That's called imagination inflation. Visualizing something, so closing your eyes and watching it happen, and perceiving it actually activates similar parts of your brain. That is why it's thought to create this false memory. So if I'm activating the same parts of my brain, and all memories are the same neurons firing in a certain order, you can see how this could possibly create a false memory, something that didn't happen just as you imagined it happening. Okay, and there's some really interesting studies we'll talk about coming up on childhood memories. Okay, another thing that we actually already talked about is something called source amnesia. I think I put this like 2 notes ago, but this is where there's a memory of, oh sorry, let me bring that up so you can see it, a memory of the event, but not the context of the acquisition. So acquisition meaning, spelt wrong, acquisition meaning where you got it, so where you acquired it from. All right, it's not going to let me fix it. Nope. Okay, sorry. So source amnesia. You misattribute where you got the source or where the source is, or you might even imagine that it was you that did that. This is why sources are considered the most frail part of memory, is because they're usually the thing if you remember the event in detail, but you don't remember where it came from. All right? Here, let's try this. Let's make this smaller for you. Oh, there we go. Okay, so memory of event, but not the context in which it was acquired. It will not let me change that. Oh, there it is. There you are. Correct spelling of acquisition. Okay, so where they was acquired or actually found. All right. So another memory test done. So how do we discern true and false memories? If our memories are so open to being reconstructed and our sources are frail, how do we like what does that show us for discerning true or false memories? So there were some memory studies done with these faces down here, and these faces are actually they're considered, I forget what it's called, mixed faces. So this is a person who's happy, like their face mixed with anger. So if you take away the smile, if you cover it up, like I just went on my screen, like if you cover up just her eyes and you're looking at them, right? So they're mixed faces where they mix the two. And they had people like create a story about why this person is happy or why this person is angry. So that was the leading question. Later in a what's it called, in the study, they were more likely to say that that person was angry or that they were happy when shown the mixed face. Okay, so this is called kind of like the gist versus the list phenomenon, so that you're getting the gist of this person being happy or sad, but not necessarily remembering the details of it. All right, so the other example I have from your book is if you read these words, candy, sugar, honey, and taste. Later on, when you are asked to recall those words, you might add a word like sweet to the list of words, because the gist of those words, candy, sugar, honey, taste, is that they all taste sweet. So sometimes you're more likely to add things to a situation that fit. We've talked about implanting fake memories in children. It's been really easy, or not, I'm sorry, not in children, of childhood memories. So you're describing something where you went to Disneyland and someone can say, oh, and remember when we saw Mickey Mouse? And you might be able, or would be more likely to say, oh yeah, I remember that because it was in Disneyland. It has context. It makes sense. And people can actually go back and imagine those things happening, and they didn't actually happen. So that leads us to our eyewitness account for children. Children's memories are very open to suggestibility. So are adults, but children more so are open to suggestibility. So we're talking about, because they're younger and their memories are still, or their brains are still developing, they are more likely to be influenced by what you say in a question. It doesn't make them bad eyewitnesses. When children are asked very neutral questions, they tend to give accurate statements. But if you have some type of leading to that question, it makes them suggestible to answer what you're looking for. So for instance, If you said, "Why did he get mad at you? Why did Dad get mad at you?" That child is more likely to come up with something about of Dad getting mad at them when maybe it didn't even happen, right? So if saying that like, "Oh, what did Dad say?" would be a more accurate recall of a child's memory. Okay. Now there's some really, I don't want to call it controversial, but conflict when we're talking about children's eyewitness recall with abuse, because children are so open to suggestions of things that didn't happen or suggestibility. There's been a tendency for adults to so one of two things, so a tendency for adults to maybe implant those memories of abuse, or not believe children because they know that children are open to suggestibility. I hope you understand that. So, because we know so children are so open to changing their memories, people know that sometimes children remember things that didn't happen, but that also that people kind of take advantage of that and say, oh, they're just imagining it. All right. So, a psychologist asking a child, like, did he touch you inappropriately, is a bad leading question versus saying, where did he touch you, or how did he touch you, right? So asking them, did he touch you inappropriately, would make the child more likely to say that they did. Now, there's a couple things, this is from your book, that both child abuse, what I want to say, advocates, or so memories of repressed and then memories of constructed, the people that are like kind of for or against those can agree on these 7 things, the areas of agreement. You might want to know this so that where they can agree is that sexual abuse does happen, that injustice does happen as well, meaning that people can be convicted of things that they did not do, that forgetting does happen, where if a person may have forgot that they were abused and then can recall it later, that doesn't necessarily make it an invalid memory, that recovered memories are incomplete. So when those memories are incomplete or are recovered, they may be incomplete or missing something. And memories made before 3 are oftentimes unreliable. Hypnotic memories are often unreliable, and memories can be emotionally upsetting. All right, so those are the areas of agreement for repressed or constructed memories of abuse. Now, these came from, or this area came from a woman psychologist named Loftus, and she did a lot of studies on, that's a really big picture of her. I don't know why I made that so big. Studies with children about implanted memories. And this actually came from her. Her mother died when she was younger, drowned, and she was at a family reunion, and an uncle said to her, like, don't you remember finding her body? And Loftus said, no, I didn't find her body. He said, yes, you did. You were 6 years old and you found your mom's like drowned body, and how has that affected you? And Loftus had no memory of it. But as she left the family reunion, she started thinking about it, and maybe I did find her body and I'm just repressing this. And she started imagining finding her body and can actually visualize, could tell you the story of finding her mom's dead body. And then years later, the uncle, there was some other people of the family, and they come to find out that she didn't find the body. It was actually her aunt. But because her uncle had suggested that, she was actually able to visualize it and think that she's the one that found it. So she did all these different studies with children, like kind of under the same pretense. She tried to implant things or have parents suggest things that didn't happen. And what she found is that children were very likely to report things that didn't happen if it was suggested by a family member. So they're able to implant memories that didn't happen. Remember when your sister was almost abducted? Remember that strange man at the mall? Things like that. Okay? Now, improving memory. So that's the end. So going back to those objectives, can you tell how imagination, misinformation, how does those things change memory? This is an odd slide I'm going to put in here because it's just 2, but I'm not going to make separate notes on improving memory. So I'm going to go through these techniques on how to improve your memory, and they have nothing to do with misinformation, what I was just lecturing about. It's just a single slide, and we're going to add it onto these notes. So here are the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 ways to improve your memory techniques, not from me, but from your book, from actual psychologists. How can I actually improve memory? At the end of all 6 of these notes, what can we get from it? So one thing we can take away is that you need to study repeatedly. Massed versus distributed studying. Remember those two things, that it's better to distribute it, but that to repeat it, to bring it back up to the relearned 100%. Make the material meaningful, semantics versus superficial levels. Activate retrieval cues. So if you can't remember a certain concept well, make a retrieval cue for it. Make some type of mnemonic device or way that helps your brain take things out so it's easier to remember. Minimize interference. We talked about interference. Going to bed right after you study is the best way to retain new information, or after you've rehearsed information, because you don't have interference going on with it. Sleep more. You have to be in a sound mood and healthy in order to keep those neural pathways going and healthy. And then make sure you're testing yourself on your own knowledge. When you're coming up with questions about your notes, rehearse it. Determine what you know and what you don't know so that it makes your studying, your memory more efficient. Okay? That is the end of your memory notes. We're going to be going into cognition next, which is a really good pathway to talking about development. All right? Have a good night.